Hi, I'm Lisa Harnett, and welcome to the CFM Talks for September. This month, we are talking about what's right for me, savings plans, and RI purchasing strategies. We have Savannah Jensen and Connor Murphy with us today, and they are customer enablement specialists. They focus almost all the time that they aren't helping me with presentations like this. They spend their time supporting telco customers, the largest telco customers, helping them understand their cost and usage and how to optimize on AWS. And the kinds of questions that they get asked are, have you wondered where to start in reducing EC2 costs? Can I mix savings plans and reserved instances? What account should I purchase in? Should I put in a payer account, a linked account? How can I allocate my costs and savings from savings plans, the costs and the savings from those savings plans and reserved instances back to those accounts? Do I do it across the different business units? Can I mix them? What account do I, so those kinds of questions. And each time we do these sessions, we start with these questions to design what our agenda is going to be and how do we make sure that our agenda addresses these kinds of questions. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Savannah and go over that. Thank you, Savannah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa. So today we are going to be doing a quick walkthrough of kind of RI and savings plan purchasing strategies. So before we get too into the weeds about where you should purchase and talk about kind of the pros and cons to different purchasing strategies and how you can achieve different things with your purchasing strategy, we'll do a review of what the products are, talk through kind of the benefits of each one, and kind of help you make that decision about which product is right for you. After that, we will go into a deep dive of where you should think about making the purchases within your organizational structure and which account is going to help you achieve your goals the best. And then at the end, we will do a summary of kind of everything that we've talked through and give you a selection of a couple AWS tools that we have to help you on this purchase journey. Based on the poll in the beginning, it seems like a couple folks in the audience have not purchased either a reserve instance or a savings plan before. So hopefully this presentation and kind of everything we go through will get your feet under you a little bit and give you a solid foundation to go back to your organization and kind of start making those purchases and those commitments to save money. So to give you all a bit of a history lesson on savings plans and reserved instances before we get into the nitty-gritty of where to purchase. Initially, we had piloted reserved instances probably about 10-ish years ago now to help save cost for our customers. So both of these products are predicated on the fact that you are making a commitment to AWS that you will use a certain compute type or a certain product type for a longer duration of time, either 1 year or a 3-year term, which helps us plan better and we can pass that savings on to you. So essentially, if you buy for a certain amount of time, we will give you a discount on that usage. Initially, we had come out with reserved instances that kind of match the way that you think of your EC2 or your RDS running cost. So for example, you could purchase a C5 extra large RI in, let's say, Northern Virginia with a certain operating system as your commitment. After a couple years of seeing what customers liked, didn't like, understanding what resonated with their needs for flexibility and needs for kind of their business, in 2019, AWS introduced savings plans, which are a more flexible commitment-based offering than the reserved instance offering in the compute space specifically. So savings plans apply to compute, spanning EC2, Fargate, and Lambda. And we have also introduced SageMaker savings plans, I believe about a year ago as well, to kind of add on to that product offering. The primary difference between RIs and savings plans is that flexibility, but also is how you commit. So with an RI model, you would commit to kind of that C5X large that I mentioned earlier, for example. With a savings plan, it is a $1 per hour commit. So you're essentially saying we will be using, for example, $1 an hour of usage for the next year, for the next 3 years in your savings plan commit, and then your savings plan will cover that usage as you kind of move through the course of the term. Both of these products are going to give you a discount on that usage, which will help you bring that cost down and kind of run as efficiently as possible. Next slide, please. Awesome. So to give you guys kind of a higher overview of the product slate across both of them, we've got kind of the summary slide here. As you can see, and as I mentioned before, those savings plans cover EC2, Lambda, Fargate, and SageMaker. They are that flexible pricing model that give you a bit more flexibility in terms of what you're covering and how you're going through those commitments. You do commit to that hourly rate. And the really cool thing about savings plans is they are engineered to apply to the usage that will give you the highest discount first. So for example, a compute savings plan, which is kind of the pair product to our older convertible RI, you commit to $ per hour rate. You do not specify a region, so it is region agnostic, it is instance family agnostic, and operating system agnostic within the compute space. It will look over your entire AWS compute landscape through an account family, if you've purchased in an account family, and find the usage that has the highest discount rate, apply that usage first, and kind of keep on making its way down the chain until it's either exhausted or there's no more usage to cover. What that does is guarantee that you are getting the highest amount of savings that you possibly can for that purchase. On the RI side, you'll see that we do have a little bit more flexibility within products. So we cover RDS, Redshift, OpenSearch, DynamoDB, and Elasticache with reservations in addition to EC2. We do still have RIs available for the EC2 product if that is kind of your chosen path. And we'll talk a little bit about the kind of pros and cons for each of those in the next couple slides. But if you are looking to cover steady state usage on one of the other products that savings plans are not available in a reserved instance, is absolutely the way to go. As I mentioned before, it is a specific pricing model. So you purchase based on instance type, family, generation, and region. It will apply to matching usage across accounts. So again, as long as you have the sharing benefit turned on within your organization, once it is kind of exhausted in the account that it lives in, it will look for any other matching usage within the account family. And you do have that benefit of kind of a little bit more service mix there, depending on your workload and what you're using. So the natural question that I'm sure is going through a lot of folks' minds is, which one do I buy? And if you are covering compute specifically, so that EC2, Fargate, Lambda, we absolutely recommend that you purchase a savings plan. They are a newer, more flexible product, and they were designed with that flexibility in mind based on customer feedback. As I mentioned before, they have that kind of cost optimization logic built right in specifically. So if you're buying a compute savings plan, that is the most flexible you can possibly get within kind of the commitment-based savings option that we have, that will apply to your highest bang for your buck workloads and really do a lot of cost optimization without a lot of effort. Unlike a convertible RI, which you would have to kind of go in and convert as your workloads change, the savings plan will convert automatically to cover that high cost usage that you're going to get a high savings margin on. So they're really light lift in terms of kind of what you get out of the effort that you put in. They are easy to use as well, specifically the compute savings plan with all of that flexibility. You kind of go in, do a bit of analysis given what you're using. You can use our billing tools to get recommendations. There's a little bit of work on the outset, but once you've purchased it, it really just does kind of sit, do its job, and do most of that optimization heavy lifting for you. The flexibility is obviously kind of what they were designed to do and what we had in mind when we were pushing out this product. But specifically in kind of the state that we are in right now in kind of everyone's cloud journey, I know modernization is top of mind, as I'm sure you all know based on that reInvent poll that you answered at the beginning. We've got reInvent coming up where we will likely launch a myriad of new features. AWS launches kind of new product offerings and new things within the compute space all the time. So that flexibility of a compute savings plan gives you the ability to play around with those and not have to worry about your RI fleet or worry about your savings fleet having to catch up because that compute savings plan or that savings plan that you're using does all that heavy lifting for you and kind of shifts as you shift and grows as you grow. All right, so with that in mind, let's think about the use cases that we still have for RIs. So given that kind of product offering matrix that we showed earlier, if you would like to cover something that we don't currently have a savings plan for, an RI is absolutely the option that you have to drive those costs down kind of quickly without any technical heavy lifting involved. If you have a lot of RDS spend that you really do need to bring down and you know it's going to be steady state for the next year or 3 years, an RI is an excellent option to do that in the offering that we do have currently. The kind of perk of a standard RI within EC2 is you do have a zonal option, which will come with a capacity reservation. We do have kind of a subset of our customers who like to leverage EC2 RIs for those capacity reservations and for that zonal reservation that's baked in. We also have something called an ODCR, which is an on-demand capacity reservation that we see people layer on top of savings plans as well to get their capacity needs addressed alongside those savings needs. Either option or either strategy will get you to the same place. It is really a matter of preference whether you would like to take kind of the EC2 standard zonal RI route or a layer of ODCR and savings plan to get there. And then this is the most common reason that we see. If you have pre-existing reporting or accounting processes that are predicated on the RI model, sometimes it takes a little bit to adjust to the savings plan framework once you kind of start introducing savings plans into the mix and into your ecosystem. The billing data is structured slightly differently from the RIs. We do have a couple quick start guides in our documentation to kind of help you parse that. But depending on the reporting that you have going on and kind of what processes you have in place, sometimes it does take a little bit to kind of shift those over to a savings plan model to make sure that you can support both at the same time. All right. So before we get into kind of the run through of where you can buy these products, I want to make sure that we all understand why we're talking about that. So the reason why there are different purchase strategies that you can use and different purchase strategies that have kind of different pros and cons throughout your organization is due to the way that these products apply. So to put this in very simple terms, RIs and savings plans always have affinity for the account that they live in. So if you purchase an RI in AWS account number 1 on the screen here, it will look to cover everything in that account first. And then if your RI sharing benefit is on for this organization, as soon as it has covered everything it can in that first linked account, it will look to the rest of the organization as well to try to kind of apply that savings benefit elsewhere if there is left over. From a payer standpoint, functions exactly the same way. It will look for workloads in the payer. As soon as those are exhausted, it will look throughout the account family. Hopefully you don't have any workloads in your payer account, but if you do, generally they're pretty small, so you kind of use that up quickly, and then it kind of flows throughout the entire account family and the entire organization. Why this is important specifically for savings plans is because of that highest discount first logic. So if you have no workload in your payer account, you purchase it in there, it is going to look across your entire organization and find that highest discount first, apply there, and then kind of continue through those rungs until it is either exhausted or there's no more usage to cover. But the thing to keep in the back of your mind about why we're talking about this in general, and really if you're going down the process of making any of these purchases, is the product that you purchase will always look to cover usage in the account that it lives in first, and then after that will kind of disperse elsewhere. So now that we're kind of familiarized with the products that we're looking for and with the history here, I'm going to turn it over to Connor to start talking about kind of the pros and cons of where you can purchase.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Savannah. And as Savannah mentioned, we went through quick history of savings plans, RIs, what they do, how they apply to your usage. And now we're going to get a little bit deeper and more technical into where should we actually go and make these purchases? What are some pros and cons there? and how should we really kind of identify what's right for us. And really, I think before we actually get into the individual, where should we make the purchase, it's better to think of really kind of 4 main buckets of what are my goals, what's my overall strategy, what's going to be my cadence, and what changes could happen to the account, right? We'll start with number 1 there, identifying the goals. But really, when you and your teams are going and thinking about making a savings plan or RI purchase, we really want to understand what are you trying to accomplish here? Do you just want to maximize savings? Do you want to make these savings plans and RIs easy to maintain and report on? Or are chargebacks your main, are they your main problem? And that's really what you're worried about. And you really want to make sure that everyone who's using these savings plans, you can identify and then make sure that your internal accounting teams can identify that and charge them back appropriately. The second bucket we have here is going to be just what's your long-term usage strategy? Because these are 1 or 3 year commitments, you're going to want to make sure that you're only covering resources that are going to be leveraged for the long term. Last thing you'd want to do is make a purchase for resources that are only running for 3 to 6 months, and then we actually have a negative ROI there. So that's going to be the second bucket we want to consider. Third here is going to be determining cadence. And when I say cadence, really what I'm referring to is how often do we want to come back and analyze our purchases? 1, to see what our coverage levels are and what our savings are, and 2, to continue to come back to the well, right? Because the beauty with savings plans and RIs is, while after you make a commitment, you are locked into that 1 or 3 year term, you can continually come back and increase your purchase size, right? So say you start off small and only want to get 25% coverage, you can then come back again and get another 25%, so on and so forth. And the good thing there is really twofold. 1, you're never going to have a significant amount of your total kind of savings plan or RI portfolio expiring on the same day. And 2, it's going to break down your analysis into more bite-sized pieces so that you don't run the risk of purchasing too much of an RI or savings plan. And then last bucket here we have is anticipate changes. And really this is going to kind of go along with understanding your long-term strategy. But as Savannah mentioned, anticipate changes, right? Whether it's modernization, new instances coming out, or your team just going from region to region. We really want to understand what changes could happen to our workloads to better understand what we should be purchasing in the first place, right? If we know we're going to be using a lot of compute, but we're not necessarily sure which region, which instance family, which operating system, et cetera, we're going to be using, maybe it's best in that case to just start with a 1 year compute savings plan, start getting some savings, build a little bit of confidence, a quick win, and then we can always come back to the well and buy more. So those are really kind of 4 main things we're going to want to consider before we make any purchases. Now moving on, we'll go a little bit deeper into what are some of the pros and cons at actually making these purchases at the payer account level, as well as the linked account level. After this, we'll go into a little bit more of kind of a blended strategy with making purchases at both. But really, when you're starting off, a lot of the times what we'll recommend is just make a quick compute savings plan purchase at the payer account level. And really kind of 3 main reasons for that is 1, your central management is going to be very easy, right? You're going to have the ability to kind of log in right at the payer account, check out your savings plans or RI utilization and coverage reports, quickly get those savings, and you're also going to be able to kind of automate any renewals that you'll need to go there. The second, and Savannah did a great job touching on this, is it's actually going to help you maximize your savings. So the way that the compute savings plans will apply to your usage, and once again, the big caveat here is assuming that you have no actual resources running in the payer account, but you're going to get the most savings out of the savings plan if you do it this way. And the third, and this is really kind of up to you and how you'd like to report your savings to your internal teams, but you have the ability to hide or expose the discounts to your linked accounts, right? So if you want to do a specific type of chargeback, you absolutely have the freedom to do so. Now shifting gears a little bit, we'll talk about the cons. And really the main one that we see here is you really don't have any control on where the RI or savings plan is going to apply within your organization, right? We touched earlier that it's going to apply to give you the highest discount first, but sometimes what happens, whether it's budgeting or otherwise, customers really want to make sure that 3 or 4 resources are receiving full benefit of a savings plan or RI. When if you make the purchase at the payer level, it's very hard to confirm that that's going to happen. The second kind of point of consideration here is, say you buy a savings plan and try to get 98 to 100% coverage, and then all of a sudden you realize, we shut down some instances and our utilization is dropping. If you make the purchase at the payer account level, that underutilization could be caused from any account within your organization. So it's going to be a little bit harder for you to really pin down, hey, was it team 1, 2, and 3, or was it team X, Y, and Z who shut down the resources and is leading to this underutilization? Then really the last 2 things that I think are worth calling out is, 1, we kind of touched on this earlier, but if you have workloads running in the payer account, they're going to receive a benefit first. So we really recommend not doing that. And last but not least, and really I think this is kind of the main one that I see, at least from customers, is it's a little bit harder to manage chargebacks, right? Because you make a purchase at the payer account level, that team is obviously kind of the central team. They're going to lose the budget at first, and then they need to charge back their individual teams or their individual linked accounts. And sometimes there's a little bit of work that goes into that. So that's kind of the main cons that we see here buying at the payer account level. Shifting gears now, we'll go into a little bit more bespoke and talking about buying at the linked account level. And really the pros here, and we touched on this earlier, but the purchase or commitment is going to have the affinity to apply into the account in which they were purchased in. So what's great here is if you only want to target, one specific linked account with a savings plan or RI purchase, this is absolutely the way to do it. The second pro here, and this is going to be a little bit natural, is it's easier to manage chargebacks because you can identify exactly where the savings plan or RI will apply first. You know that the majority of their usage is going to be within that account itself, so that's easier. Number three here, and quite frankly, I don't think this gets talked about enough, is it actually spreads some ownership to your individual business units and gives them the ability to take a little bit more ownership as it relates to costs and optimization. The other beauty to this is from a central level, you might not necessarily be able to pin down exactly what resources, regions, operating systems, et cetera, the team is going to be running for the long term. But sometimes if we're able to drill down a little bit, these individual business units actually know exactly what they're going to run. And in turn, instead of buying a compute savings plan, we might be able to drill down and buy an EC2 instance or a more kind of restrictive purchase option that's actually going to generate more savings, right? That's the beauty there. And then last but not least, the AWS Billing Conductor, commonly referred to as ABC, also kind of automatically allocates the discount to the billing group's pro forma report. And what does that mean? It just helps with your chargebacks a little bit more. AWS Billing Conductor is another AWS tool that really helps and pairs well with savings plans when purchased at the linked account level. Now some cons here, right? And this is going to contrast a little bit to what we saw in the buying at the payer level. But one, your central management is going to be a little bit harder, right? When you're making these purchases, if you do make it to the linked account level, you will have to log into each linked account to make those purchases, repurchases, et cetera. Another con is compute savings plans at the linked account level. Odds are they're probably not going to maximize the savings that they would if they were purchased at the payer level, right? That's just because of where the kind of pecking order is in terms of what's going to get the savings plan application first. And last but not least here, really, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the third bullet we have on the left, is if a business unit doesn't take ownership, you could be leaving some savings on the table, right? So you do put a little bit more onus in the hands of your individual teams rather than your kind of central team here. So now that we've covered buying at the payer level and buying at the linked account level, really what we see a lot of customers do a great job of is actually a blended strategy. And just to kind of reiterate, when I say blended strategy, what I mean here is making purchases at both the payer account level as well as the linked account levels, depending on what it is you're kind of running in each of the accounts, right? And the pros here naturally are going to be compute savings plans at the payer level are really going to maximize your savings across the board due to their application rules. Second here is you're still allowing your business units to take more ownership. And like we said, because they're going to be a little bit closer to the ground and understanding what's actually running, they're probably also going to be able to potentially make purchases that are going to drive a little bit more savings. And really what I mean there is the difference between a compute savings plan to an EC2 instance savings plan. Your central management is going to be a little bit easier for any of your purchases at the payer account level. And the other great thing here is even if your individual business units who are running these linked accounts don't take the ownership, you can still fill in the gaps and drive savings with a payer account level compute savings plan, right? So really no downside there. You're able to maximize your savings. Now, as it relates to cons, some of the things to call out here, just central management is still going to be a little bit difficult for any of those purchases at the linked account level, and the chargebacks, right? Chargebacks for the payer level could be a little bit difficult as well. However, the beauty I will say here is more than likely, if you create a solution that you put in place for any payer account level purchases, it will absolutely work for the blended account strategy as well. So now that we've talked about purchases at each different account level, right? Payer, linked, and blended, we're going to go in and shift gears a little bit into some kind of tips and management tooling, as well as recommendation tooling. So one of the first tips that I want to call out, and this is probably something that is worth checking before you make a savings plan, RI, or otherwise purchases, make sure that your RI and savings plan discount sharing is enabled. This is kind of a little bit of a hurdle that we've seen come up. Sometimes customers have reasons to make sure that this is disabled, but you just want to make sure that that conversation is had before you go and make a purchase and realize, why is account 1, 2, and 3 not getting any savings, right? So definitely recommend checking there. Second thing we want to call out is make sure that you're managing your alert subscriptions. Last thing we want to have happen is a savings plan or RI commitment expires on a weekend, and we go 3 or 4 days without recognizing what happened, and then our costs are going up because we went from getting charged the compute savings plan rate to the on-demand rate. So really we want to make sure that we're on top of that within Cost Explorer. And the third bullet here is, and Savannah mentioned this earlier, but make sure that we're aware that the RI or reserve instance and savings plan reports are going to differ. So there will be a little bit of a kind of a learning curve to understand what billing data is going to come in, what that actually translates to in terms of spend, savings, covered usage, different things like that. Now, shifting away from tips a little bit, we'll talk about management tooling. And what I mean by management tooling really is not necessarily recommendations for making a savings plan purchase. It's more so after the fact. We already have a savings plan in place. How can we manage it and get better kind of data out of it? And really the first thing that I'd like to call out here is budgets, right? So when you make a savings plan or reserved instance purchase, I would highly recommend going in and putting a coverage and utilization budget in place as well. These will do two things, right? A coverage budget is just going to say, out of your total usage, what percent is being covered by an RI savings plan? And utilization budget, what that's going to do is say, am I fully utilizing the commitment that I made, or am I losing some money on it, right? That way, one, it might be able to trigger, hey, I think this is a good time to come and check and make another purchase. Or on the utilization standpoint, it might say, uh-oh, we're losing some utilization. Let's go talk to some internal teams and see what's causing that. Second, and we touched upon this a little bit earlier, is going to be AWS Billing Conductor, or ABC. Really helps with your pro forma kind of billing data when purchases are made at the linked account level. And last but not least is automatic renewals, right? You'll see kind of a theme here is making sure that you're on top of your renewals, on top of subscriptions. But we can actually select to kind of have our savings plans and RIs automatically renew within the console. So we would recommend that as well as it relates to management. Now, shifting gears away from management tooling, we'll go still into some tooling, but a little bit more of recommendations and some analysis. And really kind of the main out of the box, and really my first check for any savings plan or RI recommendations is going to be Cost Explorer. It's going to give you a ton of data based on your historic usage in terms of what purchase did I make, what would estimated savings be, so on and so forth. The other thing you get here is after you make the purchases themselves, you actually get utilization and coverage reports. And you can see a screenshot of that on the right. This is a screenshot of a utilization report, but you can see one, how well is my commitment being utilized? You'll see it's at 100% kind of flat line, that purple there, but it also is going to give you what would I have been spending had everything been running on demand, what did I spend with my savings plan, and then what's the delta or what's my savings there. So really this is a great tool to help kind of just quick management and understand the benefit you're getting from any of your commitments. Second, and this is going to be a little bit deeper and provide more detail, but it's really enabling your cost and usage reports, commonly referred to as the CUR, and understanding kind of the data that you're getting out of them. There are a number of well-architected labs, and we have Kudos dashboards that we can set up to help you understand your total usage. But really, I also recommend making sure that these reports are enabled just so that you can get kind of the really granular hourly level data out of all your usage. This is super helpful, particularly when you're making what I would call a little bit more custom-made analysis, as in we only want to cover specific resources in specific regions, so on and so forth. So now that we've talked about tooling, I'm actually going to go in and I'll share a bit of the UI, or what you would actually see if you were to log into AWS Cost Explorer and actually go to make a kind of savings plan purchase. This is going to be our savings plan recommendation screen. And you'll see at the top, Savannah highlighted earlier, the three different toggles we have for a savings plan purchase: compute, EC2 instance, and SageMaker. Actually, compute and EC2 instance are going to cover more of your compute, with compute being much more flexible than EC2 instance, and then SageMaker as well. Moving down, we have really what I like to call almost toggles, right? Where do you want the recommendation? Do you want it at the payer or linked account level? This toggle will actually only appear if you're logged in at the payer account level. Naturally, if you're at the linked account, you're only going to get a linked account recommendation. And then the next three that we have is one, what term are we looking for, right? 1 or 3 year. Naturally, the savings are migrated for a 3 year, but a lot of times when you're starting off, 1 year is really kind of what you want to go for. Then payment option, you want to pay all of the commitment upfront, just part or 50%, or none. You just want to get billed monthly, right? That's going to be kind of your third toggle. And then based on the past, and really what this is your look back period. So for example, if you've been running resources in your account for 90 days, but really only the past 7 days or so are really kind of what you're expecting for your steady state, and that might be a great case where you'd want to toggle your look back period from 30 to 7 here to get a better recommendation. And now just moving kind of down the screen here, you'll see some great data points in terms of what am I spending today on demand? What am I expected to spend if I were to make this purchase? And what would the delta be, or what would my estimated monthly savings be here? And then last but not least, and really want to make sure we call this out, is When it comes to the actual recommendation that the system is making, that is actually down below, right? So it's going to give you your term, in this case, 1 year, payment option, in this case, all upfront, your commitment, and this is in dollars per hour, as Savannah mentioned earlier. I think in her example, she said $1 per hour, but based on this usage, it's actually recommending $287 an hour, right? So this would actually be the number that you're committing to. And then actually on the far right, what is my estimated savings? In this case, 10%. So now that we've seen savings plans, be remiss if I didn't go over reserved instances as well. It's going to be a lot of similar data, but it's just framed a little bit differently. And the first thing that I want to call out here is you'll actually see service, right? So service on the top left, right now I just have selected for RDS, or relational database service. Anytime you want to change services, you click that little drop down and you can do so, but really do want to highlight just that RIs cover more services than just EC2. You're going to have the same types of toggles as we saw for savings plans, although they're just kind of spread out a little bit differently on the screen. Next to the service, you have your term, 1 or 3 years. Based on the past, really your look back period, once again, 7, 30, or 60 days. Recommendation level, payer linked account. Once again, just calling out that that option will not be available. If you're only logged in at the linked account, you'd only see linked account level recommendations. And then payment option, all partial, no upfront. Moving on, similar to what we saw on the savings plan side, we're going to see a few data points here. And when you see total purchase recommendations, you'll see 2. That is literally just the amount of purchases it's recommending to come up with these other numbers here, right? So you'll see 2 line items down below. But in terms of kind of your savings in both a dollar and percentage basis, that's also here, kind of right in this little red box. And then down below, as I mentioned, those were actually your 2 recommendations that would drive the $182 worth of savings. And you can obviously kind of click into them to get more details if you would like. Those are hyperlinks. So now that we've covered what savings plans are, what reserved instances are, how they apply within your organization, some tips and tricks in terms of what you need to think about before you made the purchases. Really just want to kind of wrap up here and make sure we've covered out kind of all our bases. A lot of the times, the difference between savings plans and RIs, savings plans are just a little bit newer of a product, whereas RIs can also provide you savings, but they really are going to cover a few more services as well. Which product you should leverage really is going to depend upon your use case. However, we do recommend savings plans to cover the majority of your compute resources. As it relates to where should we actually make the purchases, once again, it's going to depend on your use case, but a lot of times what I've seen successful is blended purchases at both the linked and payer account levels. And then lastly, we kind of close up with tooling, whether that's AWS Cost Explorer, ABC, which is AWS Billing Conductor, or budgets. There's a number of other tools that we have here as well. But really there's a lot of out-of-the-box functionality that will help you with recommendations as well as your overall management. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time. And now we will kind of hand it over to Lisa to help with Q&A.
Hello again. So we have a couple of questions on how can I, well, so first of all, thank you. You guys, awesome going through all of that in just over a half an hour. So there's questions around finding all of my reserved instance or savings plan options for a particular service. Where would you recommend people go for that? In terms of finding it, there's the console, I think there's some documentation, but where do you point people to when they're investigating?
And Lisa, I'm going to take this as kind of assuming that it's where should I go if I want to see my recommendations? Is that kind of?
It could be recommendations, or it could be like, or what are the options? Like, is there documentation that says like, if I buy this one, maybe I don't have, maybe I'm getting ready to buy something or start a service that's going to have something. Will it have an RI? So I think it'd be recommendations for current as well as planning for future.
Okay, no, definitely. I'd say as it relates to recommendations for current based on any current usage, the best place I'd look to first of all would be within Cost Explorer, and there's just the reserved instance recommendations tab. There you can toggle between different services that you have to see, 1, are there reserved instances offered for them, and 2, what would that potential savings look like and what would that purchase look like? As it relates to kind of more broadly, we don't really have much usage. Yes, there's definitely documentation that we can find kind of just within AWS on what services do reserved instances apply for, how do they apply, is there size flexibility, so on and so forth. Savannah, I'm not sure if you want to.
Yeah, I would echo both of those things. If you are looking to cover current usage, the Cost Explorer recommendations report is usually the best first place to start. It is going to link out as well to exactly where you could purchase for each of those services, which is a great save you some clicks, save you some navigation in the console. In terms of understanding which services have these offerings, I usually direct people to the pricing page for each specific service. The pricing side of any services, kind of AWS public documentation, will include comprehensive looks at all of the pricing options that we have for that specific service and for that specific offering. So you can drill down and see if there is a reservation option, which should show pricing per SKU as well. Within compute specifically too, we have a really user-friendly page that can kind of let you compare pricing for compute savings plans, instance savings plans, et cetera, on demand, and look at the delta and the savings percentages per region, instance, et cetera, which makes it pretty easy to kind of go in there and check what's available, how much it's going to save you if you purchase a certain savings plan or RI at the particular rate that you're looking at, or with the specifications. So lots of information out there on our public documentation too.
Okay. We have a question for, is it possible to see the savings plans that are being applied from the linked account? So you're in the payer account, like how do you, I know it was one of the cons was, trying to manage when you're in a combo environment, how do you manage which one is which? How do you keep track of what's in the linked account versus the payer account so that you're not over purchasing? What are some tips for that?
Yeah, great question. Savannah, you want me to start and then you can obviously come back as well?
Go for it.
Yes, so what I think there's a couple ways. First would be within the kind of payer account level savings plan inventory tab, you will be able to see the purchases that were made at the linked account levels. So you'll have the visibility there. I think kind of the con there is in order to remake the purchase, if you want it to be at that linked account level again, you will have to log into each of those linked accounts to make the purchases. But in terms of actually seeing, hey, what does our current fleet of savings plans even look like and which linked accounts are making those purchases, you can do that at the payer level within kind of, I believe the tab is literally just called savings plans inventory. So that's one way. If you wanted to get more detailed data, you could leverage the cost and usage report as well to kind of see where are all my different savings plans applying. But I think a great starting point is just that inventory tab.
Yeah, so I think the reporting that you're going to get through the payer account, like Connor said, is going to be really helpful for all of this, certainly. You'll be able to see within the utilization report for either product which account the specific lease lives in. If you download the table data, it'll show the account name, the account number, and the lease ID, which is basically the unique identifier for each savings plan or reserved instance. If you're thinking about kind of a linked account view up, we have the ability to toggle on and off sharing RI benefit with the linked accounts in an organization and giving them that visibility through Cost Explorer through the payer accounts Cost Explorer preferences tab. If you are looking for information about where a certain RI or savings plan applied in your organization and want to tie that out to an instance level and kind of look at who's receiving the benefit, that is granularity that we will have to get through the cost and usage report. Within the well-architected labs, we have a selection of kind of pre-canned cost and usage report queries that you can use as a starting point. I believe there are a couple that should work right out of the box for exactly that use case and show you kind of which accounts are receiving the benefit, where that is going specifically with your workloads. And I will put that in the chat. I'm not sure if I have the ability to send to the entire audience, but I will send that to the folks so that we can get that to you.
You should be able to send to everybody, but you have to change the toggle at the bottom. I'll copy it and send it out. That's fine.
Cool. Thanks, Lisa.
Next question I have for you guys is we have both savings plans and RIs, and our renewal dates are coming up, and we're trying to figure out what to do. So we know that 3 years better than 1 year. We do some instance types RIs like a T3A. So what kind of tools exist beyond Kudos to do a what if analysis? Do we have, I don't think we have anything publicly available for other than Kudos for kind of doing some of that look at. I think it's all manual. But do you have any suggestions on evaluating those kinds of things.
So then you want to start with this one and then I'll jump in.
Totally. So what I usually see folks doing to think about kind of converting an RI commitment to a savings plan commitment is looking at that pricing page and doing some manual analysis across the price. So basically an RI or any instance that you are going to choose within the vast AWS ecosystem will have a $1 per hour cost. We translate that to a savings plan commit and kind of sum up the total savings plan commit amount based on that discounted savings plan rate and based on the quantity that you're looking at. That definitely can be a little bit difficult if you are having trouble or want kind of support from the AWS side. We highly recommend that you create a support case and ask kind of our support teams for an assist there. They can definitely chime in and kind of help clarify some things if you do have questions about the functionality itself. But taking a step back from the actual process of doing those conversions, I think what's more important is understanding what usage you're trying to cover, what your teams are doing, and picking the right product that works for you. So with a compute savings plan, due to the flexibility, we see customers have the ability to be a lot more aggressive with their coverage rates, just because they don't have to worry about having somebody to convert convertible RIs, or they don't have to worry about a team changing regions or changing instance families and kind of needing to have their saving strategy catch up with that or keep pace with that or adjust and pivot. Specifically with the 3-year commit as well, I would say that the compute savings plan is a really great candidate for a 3-year term, just because a lot can change in 3 years, but that flexibility can make you pretty confident that you're still going to be running at least some amount of compute in 3 years, and takes a little bit of that analysis paralysis out of it, in my experience.
Honestly, the only thing I'd add too is a lot of the times when I've seen customers look for renewals, is the first thing I would look at is just what's the utilization of what you currently have. Make sure that's at 100. Because the last thing you want to do is go and just say, hey, we need to renew everything, when actually our utilization is only 80%. So I'd say make sure you check that as well. And just have the understanding too that if you do log into Cost Explorer and any of those recommendations you see, those are already taking your current purchases into consideration. So that's all net new as well. Not necessarily going to talk, that doesn't necessarily help with any of the more tactical, like how would I go about doing it, but just kind of 2 tips there. But other than that, Savannah, I totally echo what you said.
Next one we have is, I'm going to have you repeat something that you talked about earlier, actually. So I know we talked about it early in the presentation, but why do we recommend savings plans over RIs?
You want to start this one off, Connor, or do you want me to take it?
Hey, I think you set it up earlier, so you want to go.
Totally. So really it is that flexibility that makes savings plans such an alluring product. RIs, specifically convertible RIs, they do have flexibility, but they are also a lot of maintenance. They are a lot of hands-on keyboard time, and they require a lot more monitoring than a compute savings plan, which is absolutely in the kind of set it and forget it vein a little bit more. Savings plans are engineered to save you the most money possible. So generally speaking, if we were to basically take a completely like for like RI or savings plan commit, all things the same, you will usually see more savings with that kind of savings plan flavor than with RIs, just because of that logic and that kind of savings engineering that they have going on the back end in terms of that application logic. But really, I think most of it comes down to that flexibility. They allow you to be a lot more agile in your technical development. They allow your FinOps folks to worry a lot less and spend more time thinking about other ways to optimize and finding other optimization opportunities, rather than converting an entire convertible RI fleet or monitoring and making sure that all of your kind of operating systems match across your standard RI fleet, and a lot more time tinkering, essentially.
Totally. And the only thing I would add to that is you can make one savings plan purchase in the place of, tens, hundreds, thousands of RI purchases, right? Because of the flexibility that Savannah mentioned, you can just buy one to cover everything. Whereas RIs, depending on the nuances of what instances you're running, you could need load to my point, hundreds or thousands. So I think it's just kind of ease of management as well.
Okay. Someone's asking for more about kudos. I'm going to drop a link in for a blog post that we did. But do you guys want to talk about what kudos is for a second?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Kudos dashboard is one of the dashboards that uses the cloud intelligence framework. I can drop the well-architected labs link in the chat as well. But essentially these dashboards run off of cost and usage report data. So they have that curve granularity. They are pre-prepared in QuickSight, so fairly easy to launch. They're an AWS native solution. QuickSight is very lightweight and very low cost. So it's an excellent way to get a starting point and kind of get a pre-canned view of AWS recommended ways to look at your spend in a little bit more depth than Cost Explorer, leveraging that core data. You can drill down a little bit deeper.
Okay, and then we have a specific ask. Is there specific use cases when an RI is preferred over an SP? Can you guys think of any that are like, I think there's a couple where there's a slight discount, but the problem is I feel like you spend more time, like the amount of hours you spend managing it, you end up saving not anything, but.
Yeah, no, Lisa, that's a good point. And I guess the one that I can think of that I've actually seen and implemented with a customer is when they have, 5 or 6 specific instances that need to receive the benefit, whether that be for budgeting or regulatory reasons, whatever it may be, because of the, what do they call, like almost restrictiveness of the RIs, where you have to specify, OS, region, instance, etc. It's a little bit easier to nail down exactly which instance is going to receive the benefit. That was kind of an edge case, so very rarely have I seen it happen, but that would be kind of the one that comes to mind when I think of, hey, I actually went with an RI over a savings plan. So I'm sure you have a couple others as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to cover something outside of compute, an RI is currently your only option, so that's the big one. The other one that I see is related to those capacity reservations. So with an ODCR, generally we see customers delegating those on-demand capacity reservations to their staff. Those can only be made currently in the kind of linked account or the usage account itself, so they can be a little bit harder to manage. Whereas if you have a central FinOps team that has a really good and strong RI strategy, and you also need the capacity reservation, those zonal RIs will get you that capacity reservation. So sometimes if you're buying all your RIs in one account and then having that zonal benefit flow down, you can simplify a little bit the capacity side of the house by reserving an RI instead of an ODCR. That can be a preference. I think it really depends on what you're used to. Most of the time when I see people go that direction, it's because they already have an established process for the zonal RIs and for the capacity management there. Again, we do have the ability to get you the same outcome with a ODCR and a savings plan. So just a matter of preference.
So there's a question on, is there a way to modify or convert your savings plan as your usage change?
So with a compute savings plan, it will float across your usage automatically. If you are looking at a different use case where you are no longer leveraging a savings plan that you've purchased, absolutely create a support case and reach out to our support team for assistance. They will be able to provide you some guidance there and kind of offer you what your options are.
All right, and then question just in general is how do you see customers handling chargeback and showback with savings plans? I mean, I've seen a couple of different options, but I'm curious what you guys see in terms of how customers manage that. I can talk about the ABC part after you guys answer, but
yeah.
Connor, you want to start with this one? I think you've done more of this recently.
No, definitely. Lisa, to be honest, the way that I've seen it has been relatively consistent across customers, but really kind of to give a little more background, a lot of the times it's when the payer accounts are making the purchase, right? So your central team probably doesn't have any budget, right? Is the one that actually goes in and make the purchase. And what I've worked with them on is kind of at the end of each month, we'll pull all that CUR data, cost and usage data. And really the reason that we're using that is because it's going to have the most granular level of which instances actually use the savings plan and for how many hours. And so what we do is we just come up with kind of an analysis on a monthly basis that says, if linked account 1, 2, and 3 used 100 hours of the savings plan, charge them for 100 hours of it. If, linked account 4, 5, and 6 used 200 hours, charge them for 200 hours. And then that way, the payer account itself shouldn't, especially if they have no resources running in their account, ever be charged for any of the savings plan. They actually can just allocate it back to each of their linked accounts, and it's all auditable, and you can track it month over month, etc. Really, the beauty there too is you do it once, and it's pretty much click, and then going to be a 5-minute exercise each time if you kind of make it a little bit templatized. So that's the way that I've seen it done most of the time. Some caveats there would be, all versus partial upfront purchase options, which we still actually apply the same exact logic, but it just depends on their internal accountings with how some customers have done it. But really, that's kind of the main way is if this account's using the savings plan, charge them for that much of it. Savannah, I don't know if you've seen anything kind of different.
That's definitely the most common way to do it. Like a lot of things, you can kind of make it as complex as you want to. I've got some very long ago experience of a customer who had a kind of complex way of allocating RIs that a certain business unit signed up for that were purchased in the payer versus ones that were bought under like a gap fill or shared model. I think the big question there, if you are doing a proportional split, is what do you want to do with the underutilization if you run into that? And customers have a lot of different ways of handling it. Sometimes they kind of make the payer account just eat it and take it out of everybody's budget. Sometimes they track who's kind of purchased what and then bill that underutilization back to each business unit, or sometimes it's just a proportional spread like the rest of it.
All right, so then I will do the last pitch about this, where it is AWS Billing Conductor is something that we launched earlier this year, and it does allow you to do some of that automated chargeback and showback with its pro forma billing structure. So what you can do is buy at the payer level, and all of those savings plans, the discount doesn't flow automatically into that pro forma view that the billing groups see. And then you can allocate it using some of the custom pricing rules, not reserve pricing rules, but the custom line items that, and kind of add it back to them that way. And then if they buy within the linked account, then they see their discounts, and it models the savings plan so that it only looks like it took place in that linked account, even though at the AWS level, it actually happens across all of the accounts. So AWS Billing Connector can help with some of that showback and chargeback, depending on if it's the right fit for you. We did do a more in-depth presentation on this earlier this year. I'll make sure that we throw that into the Q&A, into the window, just as a pointer to that other video. There's a whole hour about that particular solution, but it does have some specific use cases for the showback and chargeback. But that we are running out of time, so I want to go ahead and thank Connor and Savannah so much for being here. It's been a fantastic learning experience for everyone, I think. And I think we've got most of your questions answered. So, so thank you guys so much. We do have in the deck, which will be available, it's available in the link right now. It does actually have a couple of slides about AWS. You could go ahead and switch to the next slide, I think. Here, there's some references in there that for getting started with the different tooling. That well-architected lab that was mentioned earlier is in there as well. And we hope to see you next time. I think there's another slide about coming events. We have Peer Connect coming up next week, next Wednesday. It's already next Wednesday. Liberty Mutual is going to be there talking about their cost transformation journey over the years, and that'll be awesome. I'll be there for that as well. And then next month, we're going to talk about using Cost Explorer to understand your cost and usage. So looking for cost optimization using Cost Explorer for analysis, not just reporting, is what that one's going to be about. And then on Thursdays, we do have a Twitch show, keys to the AWS optimization. So those things are all coming up. But thank you guys so much for,
I think Twitch is coming back on the 22nd. We finished our most recent season, so we've had a couple of weeks off, but we will be coming back for, I believe it is season 4. Within the next couple of weeks for y'all.
Yep, and the replays are available on YouTube as well. So if you're in dire need of catching up, they're out there. So thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you, Connor. Thank you, Savannah. Thanks to everybody in the audience. And we'll see you guys next month. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.